Shall I start the lecture? So we were talking about General Assembly and how it does function and what are the important aspects and important functions that the General Assembly has to deal with. Shall I start class or shall I wait for a few more minutes? I see a very less number of students today. In the morning you were a lot, but now it is reduced to 1/4 of it, not even the half. Is anybody else joining in? I do understand it is festive days and yes, are you joining in? I'm audible, class? I'm not audible, class? Okay, raise hands if I'm audible.
Yes, miss, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay, bache. So without wasting time, I need to wind up with the syllabus. And for that, let's start with the next point. We were discussing about maintenance of peace and security, and I told you about means to attain that. General Assembly has been working towards it by three particular ways, that is by initiating any discussions, also by making recommendations, and also making collective measures with Security Council as to uniting for peace resolutions, that is the collective measures. Okay. Thereafter, then another important function is about the elected functions. So it is considered that assembly is commonly known as a central body, the whole United Nations, because it has to elect some or all the members of primarily all the organs of the United Nations. In this regard, in Security Council, for example, there are 10 non-permanent members, okay, that that are elected every year, and when an equal number of members retire after completing every 2 years. Okay, so this is one of the most important functions, that the whole all the organs procedures of elections are taken up by the General Assembly. Similarly, if we talk about the Assembly elects the members of ECOSOC, again Economic and Social Council. The 54 members of Economic and Social Council are also elected by Assembly, right? Out of them, every year 18 members retire. Similarly, Assembly also elects a few members of Trusteeship Council, okay? And also in ICJ, Assembly elects a total of 15 judges, and judges are elected through a proper system of voting by Security Council and General Assembly, that are both are independent of each other then. So also Secretary General of UN is also appointed by the General Assembly on the recommendation of Security Council. And various members of all subsidiary agencies, or specialized agencies or subsidiary organs, are all elected by which are created under Article 22, are elected by the General Assembly. So General Assembly plays a very important role in electing members, maybe some or all, in the various principal as well as subsidiary organs of the UN. So the three councils are, The election of the three councils are being an important questions actually requires 2/3 majority of the members present and voting while the members are elected. And also ICJ provides different rule for election of its judges, right? And Secretary General is appointed together by both General Assembly and Security Council. Okay, is it clear? The elective functions. So another important function that it does is functions that are related to admission, suspension, and expulsion of members. This we have already read in the previous part while we were discussing about United Nations. So when a member is admitted to the UN Assembly, it is done upon the recommendation of Security Council. So Assembly cooperates with the Security Council in suspension of members against which enforcement action could be taken. An expulsion of those who have been persistently violating the principles of the UN Charter. This we have just discussed in yesterday's class about admission, suspension, and expulsion. So, who does it? It is done by General Assembly on the recommendations of Security Council. Then, coming to the financial functions, the General Assembly performs major important functions to the finance of the UN. It is the one who considers and approves the budget of the organization. Also, it decides on the share of expenses. Okay, and it becomes obligation of the members to fulfill it. So, ICJ, is about helping it out. The assembly also considers and approves the financial and budgetary agreements with the various specialized agencies, and again provides for administrative budgets for each of these agencies and makes various financial recommendations for them. Then they have supervisory functions that are again the activities of all other organs or even the subsidiary as well as specialized agencies of the organizations are supervised by General Assembly. So it considers annual and special reports of Security Council. It also considers various reports of other organs like ECOSOC, Trusteeship Council, ICJ, and the Secretariat. So, in addition to these principal organs, even for that matter, subsidiary organs of the UN, the other UN bodies also report to the General Assembly directly or through ECOSOC. Right? So, is it clear the supervisory functions? Shall I move forward? Yes, class? Is it clear? Shall I move forward, class? At least, okay, you don't want to speak up, please raise your hands. So at least I can know that you people are listening to me, that it's making sense to you. Am I audible, class? No response?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Okay. Anyway, moving on to the legal and political functions. So, you know, all these functions which we just discussed, you know, that is functionality or even supervision, election, financial, maintenance of peace and security could somewhat be legal and somewhat be political in nature. So, you know, even General Assembly has the right, has the liberty to establish various subsidiary organs as and when it requires for its better functionality and better performance. So, through subsidiary organs, it may be a complex organ, maybe empowered one, maybe not so empowered one. So, the General Assembly regulates its administration as well as its secretariats of, these semi-autonomous subsidiary organs of the General Assembly. And this, it could be used as the channels for the Assembly to actually dimensify and help it out through various debates, deliberations, decision makings, and for a particular definite mandate also, right? So these subsidiary organs are important, because it could be formulated with time, with form, maybe through there is an internal discussion in the assembly to establish these subsidiary organs. So there are many subsidiary organs that have been established for various definite mandates, or whenever it requires by the General Assembly to create one to actually help the General Assembly or aid the General Assembly to resolve the complexities which has come across it. So, for example, if I tell you United Nations Institute of Training and Research, also International Law Commission is one of the most important subsidiary organ of General Assembly, UN General Assembly, UNGA, that is what it is called. So, also the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space that we read is another subsidiary organ. So, these organs and specialized agencies work on the, or may authorize also to take request for advisory opinions of ICJ on various legal questions per se, and also the charter may be amended in that context that has adopted the vote for third members of this General Assembly, including the permanent members of Security Council. Right? So legal functions in this text, these General Assembly is conferred upon the Constitution of the rights, the obligations, participation procedures. Again, if we talk about admission of new members, these are all enlisted in the UN Charter. And this could be, classified into legal functionality of General Assembly. Whereas political functions are those who do not have such a legal effect but remain under the scope of the Charter. So, to accept or receive recommendations or observations, the most important political function of General Assembly is firstly to actually to make recommendations, to resolve, to provide resolutions, right? So recommendations for basis of international cooperation or peaceful settlement of disputes, maybe general welfare or friendly relation, promotion of friendly relation amongst nation states. These are all political functions. So, last and not the least, what are the actual effects of such resolutions. So, General Assembly generally works and functions and performs all of these deliberative functions by making recommendations and passing and adopting resolutions. So, these resolutions are adopted to make certain recommendations to Security Council, to Secretary General, even ECOSOC, and also the Trusteeship Council and all other subsidiary organs or even non-members of the United Nations. So the point of question yet again is, what is the legal effect or legal impact or for that per se? What are the execution or effect of adoption of such resolution or effect of such recommendations? So the charter has not actually conferred upon the assembly to provide for any, provide to have certain legal obligations, but rather, or it is not like asserting it to be a proper law making, a law creating body. Okay, so these decisions are called resolutions, or these are actually done in the way of recommendations, and not they're not classified as proper decisions. So because it doesn't actually create any legal obligation on nation states or even the members of various agencies or various organs of the UN. So assembly in that context is totally incompetent, or it can't compel a state to actually implement such recommendations. So at the most, the nation states or the member states are morally bound to such recommendations, or morally bound to give effect to these final resolutions that are adopted by the General Assembly through various procedures of recommendations. So it could be, apprehended, when noted that the problems of the world cannot be resolved because member states do not pay heed to it, or maybe the recommendations of the General Assembly. So the non-enforcement of resolutions has actually severely damaged, or is unable to establish a proper implementation of its works. So, but in few cases, it does have actually affected and impacted. While decisions were taken, resolutions, the UN Charter actually emphasized to impose the binding authority which apply to direct relations of member states. So there are a few notable points where the assembly had decided that which government of a particular state shall participate, and when there should be two delegations for the participation. So these are important aspects that they can actually deliberate upon, that they can actually decide and produce upon, that are actually legally binding. The first one is decisions about participation. That who will participate, how many delegations will be coming from a particular nation state, right? Also, the apportionment and assessment of its members. So as we know, it completely works on fundings, UN, and the the members who actually pay well, paid for the funds or activities of the UN, are probably the members that had a better apportionment in the General Assembly. Similarly, administering states, you know, under the authority and the terms of trusteeship agreements are approved by General Assembly. We'll talk about these trusteeship agreements in detail while we're talking about the trusteeship council. Then you will know about this point. I'll explain it better. For by the time, just keep in mind that resolutions for the approval of trusteeship agreements are under the direct control of the General Assembly, and it can actually enforce binding authority over it. Right? So, while we are talking about General Assembly, I also want you to tell you that General Assembly elects its president, its vice president for each of the session and adopts its rules of procedure. How will it function? So at each session, the assembly distributes the most important agendas items amongst its 6 main committees, on which every member state has to get a right to present upon. So these committees which prepare, recommendations for approval are the first committee. There are total 6 committees that are having various divisions of work. Again, the distributions of agenda items. So the first agenda item of the first committee is about political security and regulation on arms. The regulation on arms and that is politics and security purposes. So the second is about the economic and financial. So the first committee deals the political committee and also the security wise, and also the arms is being in check. The second committee talks about is the economic and financial. The third is about social, humanitarian, and cultural. Okay. The fourth is about trusteeship, including the non-self-governing territories. The fifth is about administrative and budgetary committee. The sixth committee is about law, the legal committee. So the organization, works every session, and each session is the responsibility of a general committee, which is composed of the president, the vice president, and there are in total 17 vice presidents, and a chairman of the committees are present. So the assembly has a number of subsidiary organs that I just explained before this, right? So these committees, as well as the vice presidents, the president, and all the subsidiary committees set up into the session of the General Assembly, right? Is it clear? Shall I move to the next topic of Security Council, or do you have any doubts? You can just ask. Yes, class. Yes, class. Any doubts until now? No problems? Okay. So moving on to the next topic. Let me share the screen again. The Security Council. So, as we know, this is again one of the most important and the principal organ of the UNO, and it is considered to be the executive member of UNO, and it deals with, you know, about the, it is basically the executive or the organ which actually deals with the actions of the UN. So Articles 23 to 27 of the UN Charter, which are listed under Chapter 5, deal with the provisions relating to Security Council. So coming to the composition. So the council is a functional body, rather I would say, which consists of 11 members. But since 1965, it was changed to 15 members. So the 5 permanent members are, as written in China, France, Soviet Union, UK, and USA. And there are 10 non-permanent members who are elected by General Assembly for a period of 2 years, keeping in mind contribution of member states to maintain peace and security. So, in order to have an equitable agreement that 5 members from Afro-Asian nations, 1 from Eastern Europe, 2 from Latin America, and 2 from Western countries are elected. So, it may be also noted that given a regular budget, the contribution of US is 25, while that of Japan is 20. Right? So, in this context, this is the basic composition of UNO. Oh, sorry, principal organ of Security Council of UNO. So the 5 permanent members do not change; they remain constant. They do not get elected or renewed, or they retire. They don't retire. The 10 non-permanent members are elected for a period of 2 years, and for that reason, their contributions to the maintenance of peace and security are checked upon, and they are divided into equitable geographical distribution so that they get equal representations. Okay. So if a member is retiring in that year, that particular member is not eligible to get re-elected. Okay. So any non-permanent member may vacate his seat before its expiry term. Okay. Any questions? Also, each member state has 1 representative, and the number of states of UN who are not members of Security Council can also participate, but they do not have the right to vote until unless they are amongst those 10 non-permanent members. Is it clear? So about India's case, if we talk about what is the position of our country, India's position for the permanent seat of Security Council. So a number of statesmen of various countries have been advocating that there should be the permanent membership of Security Council should get enlarged and expand. The expansion is due because there are now 193 nation states who are the members of the United Nations organization. So it doesn't actually help the divide or sort the agenda of the proper distribution. So India itself have been claiming for the post or the permanent seat in the Security Council. So the considerations it's for the permanent seat is that India is considered to be one of the largest democracies, has a democratic system amongst the world. The government, that democratic government is the largest. and it has significantly actually promoted various UN peacekeeping operations. And it has actually ventured into uh, various military and peacekeeping operations, as well as supplied for various emergency forces, and also participated in about 25 UN peacekeeping operations. Okay, and in even it has helped the UN peacekeeping missions through humanitarian grounds by providing services and funds in that context. And also, India is having its influence amongst the most non aligned developing countries of the world, and which constitute the majority of members of United Nations. It has also played an important role in multilateral movements for rehabilitating colonies and newly independent countries, and helped it through them through the non-aligned movement. Also, it is one of the most populous nations after China, and it has distinct contributions in various activities and ethos of United Nations. And it is completely competent and committed to the pact of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, as well as complete disarmament. And it has tried to combat global terrorism and promoted the cause of international peace and security when it was the non-permanent member of Security Council over the years. So all these combination of the factors make it all the more relevant that India is actually a deserving candidate for the permanent membership of Security Council. That India is not militarily very strong to become a permanent member of Security Council, but the weightage to military importance has to be disregarded. Firstly, because this is a idea that should be least armaments and run counter to the ultimate aim of disarmament, right? Secondly, it is not easy to assess the military capability of nations, as well as thirdly, arms is not just the relevant criteria to put in the position and make the that is not the set criteria for the position of permanent member in the Security Council. Is it clear how India should become a permanent member of Security Council, and how what are the contributions India has made towards achieving proper status, and actually provided inputs for being a member or being a permanent member or attaining a permanent seat in the Security Council. Right? Any confusions? Yes, class. Any questions? Shall I move forward? Okay, moving to the next point, that is the voting procedure. So voting is yet another important aspect of Security Council. And as we have told you, there are total 15 members, 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent. So each of them has got one vote, and Security Council uh, needs voting on the ideas of procedural and non-procedural matters. So in context of procedural matters, that is about there is no actually divide between the procedural or non-procedural matter. So, but a joint statement for the sponsoring of powers, it has tried to explain that procedural matters are those, that is, when there is adoption or alteration of rules of procedures, if there is any determination of the method of election of its president, or maybe its own self-organization for continuous functioning, also selection of time and place of the meeting, and establishment of such types of bodies that are functionable and as and when it deems necessary for its better performance and functions. Also inviting non-members of the council in meetings for deliberations or discussions, especially if they have their own interests that affects their interests, and also invitation of a state when it is a party to the dispute to participate in these discussions. So all these matters are actually considered to be procedural matters. Okay, so these are about the procedural methods, and non-procedural include anything which is not classified under the procedural matters. So who decides whether the particular matter is procedural or non-procedural? It is basically discretion and dependent upon the president of the Security Council then, that a particular method is non-procedural or procedural. So it is to be set to vote. So if it is decided by a vote of 9 members, including the concurring votes of 5 permanent members of council. But if the matter is procedural, it can be challenged by any member or the permanent member of the council by giving its votes against of the president. Thus, the matter becomes actually non-procedural from procedural as decided by the president, right? So it implies that whether a matter is procedural or non-procedural, it is affirmative by the vote of 9 members, including the concurring vote of permanent members. So second point is about absence of members in Security Council. So there is no quorum which has been provided by the UN Charter for Security Council. So the decisions can be taken by the Council uh, why and when if there is no permanent member, or maybe 1 or 2 permanent members are missing and are absent from the Council. So each member of the Council is required to remain present in all the meetings of Security Council. Also, in order to make it possible, each member is required to represent itself at all times, all at seat of the organization. If a member is absent, the absence shall be deemed to the violation of members' obligation in carrying out the primary responsibility of maintenance of peace and security. But if a person or a member is absent, the Security Council will never be able to take decisions on procedural matters, again, which requires an affirmative vote of 9 members. So, but the Council would be able to take decisions on the non-procedural matters as well as if the permanent member is absent from the Council and if the absent permanent member is a disputant state. Okay. So as to non-procedural matters, the charter does not lay any provision for such decisions, for such situations. Okay. This was about being absent from the Security Council. Then comes the most important part, that is the veto power. So the veto power, I'll not take much of your time. I'll just try to wind it up in like a particular way. I just want to explain what is basically veto. So, if a permanent member casts a negative vote on a non-procedural matter, or maybe on a substantive matter, that decision is considered to be blocked or vetoed and doesn't come into existence. Right? It means that no decision can be taken by the council on such matters because of the dissent vote given to it by a permanent member. This implies that if a permanent member wishes that no decision is to be taken in that particular issue by the council, it has the power to give the veto or dissent or cancel the decision by giving its veto vote. So, through this dissenting vote, a permanent member can actually block the issue in the council. So, if the concurring vote is withheld by any of the permanent member, that proposal shall be vetoed. That is, it cannot be validly adopted. So, a veto is defined as a negative vote that is cast by a permanent member of the Security Council, affecting or nullifying the affirmative votes when adequate majority. So the term veto has actually no place in the UN Charter. And the San Francisco, conference actually provided with the right to veto, which was again the right of each of the big five. The big powers or the great powers that are considered to be under public international law. So there is actually no procedure to obtain or become a larger power or a great power, but rather to exercise the power of veto, it makes it more powerful. And it has actually divided the nation states amongst being powerful or being more powerful or being less powerful. So we'll continue discussing about veto power and how it is exercised and what occasions it was exercised by various examples, and how Security Council has, maintained its ideals to maintain peace and security with this particular element of veto, and how it evolved, through the Cold War towards now the COVID crisis. We'll discuss it on Monday, probably because it's Diwali time. So let me just take the attendance for now, and just give me a moment. So wishing you all a very happy Deepavali, and may goodness bless you all. I hope this festive season brings good luck and happiness to you all. I'm just downloading the attendance for them. Just give me a moment. So your attendance is downloaded. Thank you so much. We'll continue it on Monday. And wishing you the best of these festivities. Have a happy weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Happy Diwali.
Thank you. Happy Diwali to you too. So I'm ending the class now.